What does somebody sitting with the 103 do here?
Well, I'll give you a player on this one because last time I just talked about moving around the draft board. If I'm in that range, and I'll say for the 103 specifically, the guy I would probably be looking at is Jackson Dart. I think that he has a wide range of opinions on him. When I wrote this in the show sheet, I didn't know Theo was already going to bring him up earlier today. I'm a believer. I thought his statistical profile coming out of college was really strong. I liked a lot of his tape. There's still some longer-term job security issues, but there's no short-term issues. He's definitely going to be their guy for this year. He gets Malik Neighbors back next year. He has Andrew Thomas as a left tackle, and we've gotten the chance to see him in the NFL. He's a player I have a reasonable amount of conviction in. Mendoza is probably safer because he's going to have that draft capital insulation. I personally think Dart, with his rushing ability and with his ability to provably be an efficient quarterback for a rookie in the NFL, is a guy that I think has just significantly higher QB1 fantasy upside.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back in. If you're finding your way back to us in our small corner of the Dynasty landscape, if you're new here, welcome in, have a seat, and join us as we talk about players that we would be sending away for 2026 rookie draft picks. Today, we're covering picks 1 through 6. Joining me, as always, Theo Graminger. That's Jakob Sanderson. I'm Thomas Tipple, hosting. Theo, what are you sending away for the 101?
Yeah, so I think understand if you're moving the 101, you're moving Jeremiah Love, which is a extremely fantasy-friendly, locked-in dynasty asset. And when we're talking about the 101, I think that the 101, as the community learns more and more about Jeremiah Love, as we see more and more experts projecting him to go inside of the top 7 or so picks in the NFL draft, that pick is only going to gain value. You also get the benefit that a lot of big boards are starting to come out from NFL draft experts, and Jeremiah Love is the highest ranked offensive player in this entire draft class, for some by a considerable margin. So Jeremiah Love completely locked in. If I'm going to move off of the 101, I'm going to start the conversation with players that are also truly elite, not necessarily at the running back position. And Thomas, Jacob, I think that the conversation gets started on the players who were steamed up in Dynasty last season but had injury-plagued sophomore years. I'm gonna potentially take on a Jaden Daniels with this pick. I'm going to potentially take on a Malik Neighbors. And I think for some managers who really overvalue the running back position on their rosters because of the scarcity, I might be able to get a Malik Neighbors plus due to him being banged up right now. So those are the conversations I'm starting it out with. I'm also of the opinion that the 102 is a little bit undervalued right now. And I think there's an opportunity to send the 101 and get the 102 and value on top of the 102 that basically equals out to a future first-round pick. I think that is out there right now, and I think that 102 is going to also continue to gain value because of the flexibility between wide receiver 1 or Fernando Mendoza. So that's sort of where I'm at, and just an example of what the 101 is worth right now. I'm in a $750 FFPC Triflex format, a Start 10 Superflex. I offered Jackson Dart for the 101 to a quarterback-needy manager, and I didn't even get a counter back. That's being laughed away in the Dynasty community right now.
That's right. So it looks like it's going to be high-end only. What I find interesting is by our ADP, going ahead of Caleb Williams and Jalen Hurts still. So that value is at a pretty high peak. Jacob, when we take a look one spot down, what do you have in mind for the 102?
Well, I think I might be a little bit on the other side of Theo from this, because the 102 to me, this could change maybe on draft night, and maybe Theo ends up looking great if one of these wide receivers gets an incredible landing spot. But I'm pretty unenthused about the 102 right now. I'm not very high on Mendoza for Dynasty relative to where I think he's going to be valued in drafts, unless we have a quarterback who is, to me, either as an elite runner or as an elite statistical profile. I'm not very enthused about taking them with the top 5 Dynasty pick, and he's a little outside the mark for me on both those fronts. So I'm probably looking at a Lemon or a Tate with that pick, and I do view the gap between them and Love as being about a first. I think for me, if people are looking at what's happened recently, which is the 101 generally being a pick you'd prefer to trade back from in rookie drafts. and people aren't super locked in to who is slotting into which of these picks, I would be reasonably open-minded to a move up to the 101. Or what I'm probably most enthused about from the 102 is trying to get back to the 104, which I think is more where I want to be in the tier. I view 2, 3, 4 very interchangeably right now between the top two wide receivers for me and Mendoza, who I'm probably less into, but I expect will go 2 or 3 in most drafts. And so I'm probably looking to trade back actually from the 102 or even continue to trade up from the 102 to the 101 if I could get it done for a first or less.
Yeah, I know. I think it's interesting, and I can understand sort of your apprehension. I think ultimately it kind of depends on how you value Carnell Tate at this point. I think for some people like yourself who seem to have Lemon and Tate pretty close in your potential rankings, and it may be landing spot dependent. With some, I think will have Tate as a big certified alpha, tall outside X who's got the potential to be a really strong fantasy asset. So I agree sort of with your apprehension on Mendoza to a point. I do think we've gotten the Clint Kubiak bump here, and it creates a pathway that Kubiak and that offense could help support Mendoza being maybe a top 15 starter at some point early on in his career for us. He's going to have to throw a lot of touchdown passes, but I think the offense could end up supporting that. So I get it. I think that's sort of a pretty solid take on how you'd handle that 102.
Keeping it going on the draft shelf here, Jacob, you said you viewed them in kind of a bundle. What does somebody sitting with the 103 do here?
Well, I'll give you a player on this one because last time I just talked about moving around the draft board. I mean, we just talked about Fernando Mendoza. He's going to be one of the guys that's going to be a common player that's going to be selected at the 102 or the 103. If I'm in that range, and I'll say for the 103 specifically, the guy I would probably be looking at is Jackson Dart. I think that he has a wide range of opinions on him. When I wrote this in the show sheet, I didn't know Theo was already going to bring him up earlier today. I'm a believer. I thought his statistical profile coming out of college was really strong. I liked a lot of his tape. I love that he runs. I was worried with him going in the late first just on what's the security. Would he be able to survive to a new regime? There's still some longer-term job security issues, but there's no short-term issues. He's definitely going to be their guy for this year. He gets Malik Neighbors back next year. He has Andrew Thomas as a left tackle, and we've gotten the chance to see him in the NFL. He's a player I have a reasonable amount of conviction in, and I think that while Mendoza is probably safer from who's starting in 4 or 5 years because he's going to have that draft capital insulation, I personally think Dart, with his rushing ability and with his ability to provably be an efficient quarterback for a rookie in the NFL, is a guy that I think has just significantly higher QB1 fantasy upside. And that's a guy that if I was going to make that aggressive move and go straight across, that's a guy that I think you could get because there's people that have a wide range of views on him that I would be pretty open-minded to making a move for.
Yeah, I like that as well. Using picks to go and get yourself a solidified stud at an important position like that is definitely something you want to be pushing. Theo, mid to early picks start to get a little bit wavy in terms of players, values all over the place.
Yeah, so the 104, I'm specifically looking at some quarterback needy teams and on my Dynasty opponents because I think there's the perception that this could end up being the Fernando Mendoza pick. I know a lot of Dynasty rookie drafts now have Mendoza floating around at like the 104, 105. I think that's also projecting that we're not going to get really good wide receiver landing spots. So I think the 104 has a lot of value, but it has less insulation than like the picks Jacob referenced at the 102, the 103, where basically you're going to get your shot on one of those guys and potentially a tier develops between the 2 and the 5 that might not be there for some managers. So I think if I'm in a contending type situation, when I'm looking at the 104, Thomas, it's a player that you've talked about a while. Can I get Jonathan Taylor plus from some Dynasty managers out there who are taking Jonathan Taylor for later picks? Get a 27-year-old running back. 27 has been an age where we've seen a number of players hitting RB1 overall right in that wheelhouse over the last couple years. Do I get the conversation started there? I think I can get that deal done in a lot of leagues. Can I get James Cook plus? I'm looking to get an elite scorer at the running back position if I move off of this asset and my team is ready to run. if my team is a little bit younger, do I get the conversation started with a Teteroa McMillan manager where I prefer Teteroa McMillan to the 104, but I know there's some apprehension out there where I bring up Teteroa McMillan as a player that I'm very bullish on from a best ball lens, from a redraft lens this season heading into year 2. But I think there's some apprehension in the community because of the uneasiness with Bryce Young being able to support a elite asset. So I think maybe there's a chance that I get a manager looking to re-roll their Teteroa McMillan selection. And if I have to put a tiny, tiny bit on top, I think I'm comfortable doing that because I think with McMillan, we already know we have a top 10 draft pick. We already saw him flash in a major way as a rookie. It's just the lack of consistent high-end production because of the quarterback situation, which you guys know at any point could get a lot better for him. So that's sort of where I'm at. I'm swinging big, maybe on multiple directions depending on the context of my team.
No, I love it. I love the Jonathan Taylor take. That is just something we see all the time this time of year, sell these running backs. Yet, when it comes push to shove, well, we're going to be right back telling you to buy certain running backs. And I think he's just always going to be one of those targets. Let's check in at 105. And I don't think, Jacob, you're going to surprise anybody that listens to you on a regular basis with the player that you have here.
Had to get my guy in here somewhere. Luther Burden is my pick here. I think strictly profile to profile, there's going to be a lot of wide receivers that go higher in this upcoming draft than where Luther Burden went last year. I think a lot of that is to do with how weak not only the wide receiver class is, but how weak the draft is as a whole at all of the other non-fantasy positions, pushing fantasy eligible players up. If Burden had come out in this class with the identical profile, even without seeing anything that we saw from him on an NFL football field, I think he'd probably be my wide receiver 3 right now in this year's class. Seeing what we did last year, which was being extraordinarily efficient, albeit on limited routes, in the NFL, just moving at a really incredible degree, showing his athleticism translated instantly to the league. And then the fact that he's put in this offense that looks like an absolute engine. I mean, they were humming last year with Ben Johnson, even while people such as certain Fantasy Points employees were looking through the numbers of the fine-tooth comb and pointing out that maybe Caleb Williams was not even actually playing to his full potential or to his ceiling. So I think you want pieces of the Bears. I'm super in on Loveland too. I think you should be really optimistic about Caleb going forward. But Burden's the guy that I just keep seeing as people, again, similar to Dart, it's a guy that I am sold on. I've seen enough. I don't think that everybody has seen enough. And so if people want to cash out high, I would definitely be willing to at the 105 slot. And I'll note, like right now, I have a tier break between 4 and 5. We're in February. I have a lot more work to do on the class. There's landing spots that are going to change things. But like to the extent that we can formulate tiers 2 months before the NFL draft, that's kind of where I have a bit of a break. So if I could use that 105 pick to go get a player, that'd be one that I'd be looking to use.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Jacob, because there's a lot of collective enthusiasm with the fantasy like analysts and people like creating content for fantasy with Luther Burden. But there isn't that sort of steam, I think, with the general Dynasty community yet. I think you can get that deal done. I think you can go ahead and get Luther Burden. I think you can also ask maybe for Luther Burden and a third from some managers out there because the perception that they're cashing in, hey, I got Luther Burden at the 201 last year. Now I'm going to turn that into a top 5 selection. That's a win for me. When, like you said, the talent gap between the two classes is getting pretty evident when we're having these conversations. So I'm completely there. Burden also doesn't have the best ball / redraft bump that maybe we would have thought for a player with his sort of unknown upside. He's wide receiver 22 in like FFPC and underdog rankings right now. So anybody getting in those early drafts is also seeing, hey, it's a low-end wide receiver 2 at this point. So I love that idea to be able to turn that pick into a player that you already know has the talent and he's in a dynamic offensive ecosystem with a quarterback and a play caller that you know you trust. So Burden's going to get that bump as soon as DJ Moore's moved this offseason. And even if he's not, I think Burden's a pretty locked-in asset. So I actually really like that idea of how to pivot off of the 105.
And let's not forget, you're going to want to be getting in on these young players like Luther Burden before he hits our industry-leading projections. It's only going to boost his value. You can do that using promo code Dynasty. Get 10% off any package on the website. You are not going to want to miss out on the opportunity to, again, get in on industry leading projections, draft guides, everything you need to help crush your Dynasty leagues here in 2026. Let's round everything out with the 106 here. Theo, you have an interesting note.
Yeah, so I think when you get to the 106, can I get the conversation started on Chris Olave with some Dynasty managers who maybe got Olave at a discount last year in terms of Dynasty startup valuation? Maybe they bought low on him after the heavily concussed season. Can I get the conversation started? Can I turn this into elite production? I got a lot of comments when I did this sort of exercise on a Dynasty Life where people said, hey, not in my league, bro. You're not getting the conversation on Chris Olave. That 106 isn't worth anything. But guys, all it takes is one, and there's always going to be Dynasty managers who want to be contrarian. There's also going to be Dynasty managers who really overvalue the optimism that's surrounded with Dynasty rookie picks. So I think know your league. I'd kick the tires on that. So I'm looking to turn 106 into elite production, but maybe not the perception that this player is in the truly elite range. I think Chris Olave, if the season goes well for him, we could be looking at like a 17 point per game season. I'm also looking at, I mentioned the name James Cook, who's always a polarizing name for the Dynasty community. We've seen a big correction on James Cook with his best ball price tag, with his early redraft not ADP, but ranking at this point. But I still think, does the 106 plus get me in the conversation for James Cook, who's always just outside of the elite running back rankings in Dynasty, but he's giving us elite scoring. Now we've got the Pete Carmichael effect. Maybe he catches additional passes this year. And then, guys, the reality is, if I can't get a deal like that done, I'm not going to take, I think also Jacob's call on Burden, I think that's an interesting way. 106 maybe gets that deal done for you as well. But if I can't get that sort of high-end upside with a player like Burden, I can't get the potential high-end production, then I'm going to start kicking the tires on potentially taking a 2027 first plus. And I think that's out there in a lot of leagues for this 106. The idea with the 106 is there's a handful of players, guys. Casey Concepcion, certainly Kenyon Sadiq if he lands with high draft capital, especially in tight end premium. Boston, and then a couple of the running backs that there's a little bit of a hive for, the Jadarian Prices, the Jonah Colemans, if they get top 45 draft capital in a great landing spot. There's an argument that there could be a bailout for the 106, but it could also go the other way, and the 106 could get worth less than the unknown right now. So I'm kicking the tires on that 2027 first. I know for some people the cutoff might be the 107. I'm starting to look at the random 2027 first for that, but we all know what the 2027 firsts are worth now in the Dynasty community. So if I can turn my 106 into a 2027 random first and maybe a late second in this draft, maybe an early third in this draft, I think that's about the value that it's at in the open market.
Yeah, I love the James Cook call. He is just somebody that he qualifies as one of those running backs, even though he's not as old as Jonathan Taylor, that people are already suggesting to get out of because he may not have Bijan Robinson upside. He doesn't have the Christian McCaffrey 20 plus points per game every week, but we definitely know that he can break a week. He is a bona fide RB1, and those are just never as readily available as they are at this point in the offseason. So I love the James Cook call. Go and put some feelers out, especially again for Chris Olave. I saw some of the replies from Dynasty Life, and I could not believe that people are saying that, oh, we know what his upside. Yeah, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
His upside was awesome. Great player. Happy he's healthy. That's 1 through 6. Join us for episode 2 as we go 7 through 12. You're not going to want to miss that. Hit subscribe and the like. It's free to do and helps us a ton. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose. On your best days are always spent tilting.